Let's begin with the word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we invite your presence this morning as we open your word together, as we look at our history, as we try to understand the truth for this time. Help us to sort through the various things that we will study today. We ask for your guidance and direction. And we ask, Lord, that you can help each person to understand these things, whether they're watching in person or online later. We ask that your Holy Spirit can be with them, that your angels can watch over them. Help us to search for truth as for hidden treasure, and help as we study together to give us clear minds, and help me to speak clearly and to understand these things as well. Be with this movement. Help us to recognize the responsibility that we have to reflect your character in all that we do. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good morning, everyone. So we obviously finished off with this section here yesterday morning. And I'm just going to read through it again a bit more slowly. I kind of rushed through it. But the basic idea that we saw is that when Jeff is writing these notes, he's definitely before 9/11. And one of the things is that he clearly is marking 1989 as the parallel to August 11th, 1840. So he's not taking the end of the second woe and lining it up with 9/11. He doesn't even know about 9/11. But he does introduce the idea of the role of Islam and that it has a part to play in the events that are going to follow. He's not really very clear what those things are, other than the symbols that come from the prophecy itself. So if we read here again about the first woe or fifth trumpet, he says, Arabic Islam, a power of the bottomless pit, sudden and violent in nature. So this idea that Islam is sudden and violent isn't something that we invented after 9/11. It's something that we understood from the study of the trumpets themselves, the nature of Islam. So it wasn't something that as an afterthought we went back and said, oh, 9/11 has this characteristic and we can see this in the first and second woe. No, this was understood before 9/11. A prolonged war between East and West, culminating in the Battle of Nineveh, was the key to and preceded their rise to power. So what is he paralleling this prolonged war between East and West and the Battle of Baphomet here that he's talking about? How would he look at this in connection with our time?
Well, it's not the Battle of Baphomet, it's the Battle of Nineveh.
Okay, the Battle of Nineveh, is that a different one?
Yes.
Okay, what's the Battle of Nineveh?
So this was around 627, around that time, between Rome and the Sassanid.
Okay, so this is, okay. So when he says culminating with the Battle of Nineveh was the key to and preceded their rise to power. So this would be, okay, so this is, okay, I see what you're talking about. I was kind of thinking the Battle of Nineveh was the Battle of Nicomedia. Okay, so this Battle of Nineveh is between East and West. So this is a battle between Eastern Rome and Western Rome?
No, between Eastern Rome and the Sassanid Empire.
Okay, the Sassanid.
So you have that King Chosroes II.
Okay. So what does he mean between East and West then?
Well, Eastern Rome is actually in the West in this here instance.
Yeah, okay.
And so the Sassanid Empire would actually be on the east.
Yeah, that's what I would think. So that doesn't really make much sense. So I'm trying to understand why he talks about between East and West. Because is making a parallel between the East and West in our time, but maybe I'm misreading that.
Well, Eastern Rome is kind of like West.
Yeah, yeah.
The direction of these empires are kind of have a more of an East-West sort of latitude.
Okay, yeah. So I'm familiar with that because I watched some videos on it. I just wouldn't have viewed East and West as that example. But they are East and West of each other. But to me, it's hard to call Eastern Rome the West. But okay. So anyway, there's a prolonged war. And see, I would see that he was paralleling this with the Cold War, which is why he uses this.
I think that's his thinking.
Yeah, okay. So that's the main thing. Okay, so they were to torment and hurt the beast that was Eastern pagan Rome and the beast that is papal Rome for 5 months, 150 years. Now, even when he uses the term Eastern pagan Rome, is it really Eastern pagan Rome?
At this time, it was more Christian.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can see here that Jeff has a partial understanding of some of these things, but or maybe it's just the choice of words, where he's trying to illustrate something, pagan and papal here, maybe. But yeah, Eastern Rome isn't pagan anymore; it's Christian by 1299. So, and he says this.
This is not 1299. This is around the 600s.
No, but this one here, he's going to be referring to the Battle of Nicomedia for 5 months. So he's talking about the 5 months of 150 years. So especially by the time you get to 1299, you can't talk about it as Eastern pagan Rome.
Right, okay.
Right. So that's what he's saying. They were to torment and hurt the beast that was Eastern pagan Rome and the beast that is papal Rome for 5 months. Now, I'm not quite sure if that makes much sense. I mean, they were heard papal Rome long before 1299 because you have the Crusades going on. Now, of course, you could say maybe papal Rome is trying to hurt, Islam, but they have these long Crusades going on, which is a battle between the papacy and Islam is actually occurring. But Islam is also fighting against Eastern Rome. And there's all kinds of battles that occur, sieges of Constantinople, etc. But it's not until after the first woe, at the beginning of the second woe, that you have the fall of Constantinople. So Jeff, in trying to make this summary, he's going back over this history, just trying to give a summary of it. I don't think it's quite as precise as I would like, but he says they were not to hurt those who had the seal of God, right? So the Sabbath keepers, Sabbath keeping Christians. They had a king over them who is the angel of the bottomless pit. So that's Othman or Osman. The first woe concludes when the last emperor of Eastern Rome, John Paleologos, I'm not sure why he spells it that way, left his throne to his son Constantine. That's Constantine the 11th. Constantine refused to accept the throne without permission of the Turkish power, which when he received, he then ascended to the throne in 1449. In May 1453, Constantinople falls. So it's kind of a bit, from my perspective now, from our perspective, that there's details that Jeff didn't fully understand when he made this summary, but it's not bad. It's just, I don't know if I would have done it differently, but be that as it may, one of the things it shows us is that Jeff, and especially in the earlier part, that Jeff is looking at this prior to 9/11. So he's looking at this study of the trumpets before 9/11. He doesn't see 9/11. He doesn't mention 9/11. But it's this next part, which we finished off with, that gave people a belief, and even Jeff himself, when he had seen it, that he must have written this after 9/11, but he'd only seen part of it. Tabo showed it to him. So then Tabo was upset with me that I was promoting that Jeff was teaching about 9/11 before 9/11. And it was one of the things that he brought to bear, that I was some kind of radical or something. I don't know. So the Sunday law in the United States. So this is the main thing that Jeff is seeing back then, is that you have the end of, or the beginning of the third woe followed by the Sunday law. So he's making this parallel. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. So Daniel 11, verse 41. Islam, a power from the bottomless pit, sudden and violent in nature, after a prolonged war between atheism and Catholicism. So you can see the parallel here. He's going back here, Arabic Islam, and now he's going here to Islam, a power from the bottomless pit, sudden and violent in nature. So he's talking about our history. After a prolonged war between atheism and Catholicism. So that's Russia, the Soviet Union, and the Catholic Church. Islam begins its warfare again. This is fulfillment of the prophecy of Ishmael. So Jeff is saying that Islam is beginning its war at this time, after this conflict between the USSR and the Catholic Church. Is that what he's saying? Is he making this parallel? Because in this history, is there a Sunday law? Because he's going back to the start of the papacy in 538, and so there's, which we see there's a Sunday law sort of symbolically connected there. Jeff's not really explicitly laying this out, but he is making this parallel. We would agree upon that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Basically saying the same thing, but now he's putting it in connection with the Sunday law itself. So, and the prophecy of Ishmael, which he has done this study on about Ishmael, right? So we know every man shall, his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. So then he says, modern radical Islam will torment and hurt the beast that was, the USA, through sudden and violent actions, with the emphasis on modern gunpowder. It will also hurt and torment the beast that is, which at this point is coming together into the threefold union of modern Babylon, the beast, the dragon, and the false prophet, the United Nations, the New World Order. The circumstances created by radical Islam will provide the environment politically, economically, socially, and religiously to pass a Sunday law in the USA. At this point, the sealing of God's people begins. So Jeff doesn't tell us what it is that he's seen back in 2000 regarding Islam. All is, and this is why there's this problem, because when I went through all of the newsletters, every single one of them, to try to find anything about Islam, there's very, very little that Jeff is talking about in the Future News newsletters. So it's not something that when he's picking all these different news stories and so forth, he's not focused upon Islam. So my view is that probably in the year 2000, he does this study on the trumpets, and he notices this, but he just forgets about it, which I find kind of odd that, basically a bit over a year later, the Twin Towers are going to come down, and Jeff isn't immediately, based on what he wrote here, saying this is the third woe. Now, of course, Jeff has attached the third woe to 1989. That is, that's where he sees the parallel. That is, he's not saying it that way, but he sees the parallel in our history of 1989 with August 11th, 1840, back in this history. So when you take these two paragraphs right at the bottom, and I did this, I posted them on Facebook. People believe that this was written after 9/11. Ask people, when do you think this was written? People said, well, obviously it was written after 9/11. Couldn't have been written before. And Jeff even thought it was after 9/11. Okay, so what do people think about this? What Jeff is saying? I mean, you can see his thoughts are incomplete. Would we agree with that?
Yeah, I can see that.
And we could also see that he wouldn't have said this after 9/11. And why not? What is there in here that's different than what we were teaching after 9/11?
Well, you've already mentioned that he parallels 1989 with 1840.
Okay. Yeah, which is true. But in these two paragraphs themselves, the last two, I mean, there's definitely things that we can see that parallel 9/11. So, things that would lead us to just superficially reading this, what must have been written after 9/11. How about the circumstances created by radical Islam will provide the environment politically, economically, socially, and religiously to pass a Sunday law in the USA? Is that what we've been teaching about Islam? Because this comes into play with what Odilio was saying regarding 9/11, that 9/11 needed to be an inside job, and that you needed 9/11 in order to bring in the Sunday law. So that is very similar to what Jeff is saying here. We were arguing that Islam is actually to protect us from the Sunday law. So the question is, how can he say that radical Islam provides the environment politically, economically, socially, and religiously to pass a Sunday law if the role of Islam is to protect us from the Sunday law? What's going on here in this statement? What's going on in Jeff's mind?
Maybe he was thinking the statement where Ellen White says it's the Sunday law is passed to restore temporal prosperity.
Okay.
And so maybe he's thinking that Islam will cause an economic collapse.
Yeah, that's what I would think. But it kind of goes against other ideas that he's presented regarding Islam. So one of my objections to Odilio's view is that Jeff thinks a Sunday law is imminent, right, in the 1990s. And you're going to, if we go on to his next study, he's going to show that. And the next study was written in about maybe August or something like that of 2000, I believe. I can't remember, because he has all kinds of dates of things that he's referring to and events that are coming in the future. So you can sort of place exactly what he is when he wrote those notes. But Jeff is focused upon the Sunday law. And here he's introducing the idea that Islam is going to create an environment that is actually going to promote the Sunday law. So the idea then that Jeff has is different than he was talking about afterwards. The idea here was that Islam is going to do some things that's going to bring in the Sunday law, where later on, the idea was Islam protected us from a Sunday law. And so maybe there's something in our understanding that should go back to what Jeff said here, because we can see that an environment was created that has created the situation we have today, that 9/11 did bring about a change of environment. And yet Jeff, before that, believed a Sunday law was imminent. So to me, it's a little bit difficult to reconcile. Now, let's go on and read the rest of this study. Okay, at the Sunday law in the USA, Satan begins his marvelous work. Satan is the destroyer and the angel of the bottomless pit in the Old and New Testament, which are symbolized in Greek and Hebrew. Somebody's microphone is making lots of noise. It's you, Stephen. By the decree enforcing the institution of the papacy in violation of the law of God, our nation will disconnect herself fully from righteousness. When Protestantism shall stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of the Roman power, when she shall reach over the abyss to clasp the hands with spiritualism. So this is one of those statements that, to me, which we've as Seventh-day Adventists have known for a long time. So when did Protestantism stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of the Roman power?
We have under Reagan and
Okay, so we would place it
John
on
Paul.
and I think that's pretty solid. Now, but then when does she reach over the abyss to clasp hands with spiritualism? Where would we place that? If it has happened, where would we place that, this movement? Where would we place that? Because the United States and the papacy combined to overthrow the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was that spiritualistic power. It was atheism. So
are you placing that then in 1989?
no, not the clasping the hands of spiritualism, because it doesn't. It's actually fighting against spiritualism. So they first grasp hands, the papacy and the US, to try to overthrow spiritualism. So the Soviet Union falls, but not the head. The flood comes, it only goes up to the neck. So wouldn't we put them clasping the hands of spiritualism with what is happening today?
Can you explain a little bit more?
Okay, so in my view, the United States has been taken over by the globalists. The people who are in power, many of them, even though they posture at some kind of religion, but not all of them, are basically that same spiritualistic power, communism, socialism, that created the Soviet Union, that they have the same principles, and that the United States, first under Reagan, connected with the papacy, but this new power in the United States is now connecting with spiritualism, and that these are all being united at the present time. We never had the clasping of the hands with spiritualism under Reagan, because Reagan believed by clasping hands with the Roman power, he was going to overthrow communism, and sort of did, but not the head. But now United States, from what I can see, is really controlled by people who believe in the New World Order, in communism, in atheism, really. And if I was going to put a date on it, I personally would put January 6, 2021.
as the beginning of this?
as the clasping of the hands with spiritualism.
All right.
Now it says Protestantism, of course, Ellen White's words are not the United States, but Protestantism. Can we say that Protestantism has bought into BLM, LGBTQ, socialism, and that the power of the state should control the lives of individuals? Not all Protestantism, the majority.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, including some Adventist circles.
Including Adventism, right? You're going to
Yeah.
find some, what the media will portray as radicals opposing this, but of what's happening today. But really, most of Protestantism is fine with everything that's happening. One of the reasons Trump didn't get elected is there wasn't enough support. Now, one of the problems and why there wasn't enough support is because they changed how the election was done. Generally, the people who would support the Democrats are too lazy to go out and vote. That's just a reality. So in this case, by changing how the election was done, it allowed more of the supporters to actually vote to get the Democrats in. But I would say that the Democratic Party is connected with the globalists, and we've known this for a long time. But Protestants are supporting the Democratic Party. It's not this divide of, Republicans are Protestants and Democrats are Catholics or anything like that. At least in my perspective of all the things that I've looked into. There's been a change in Protestantism. And you can see it by reading the Protestant websites, the Protestant, especially the main papers, Christianity Today and things like that.
Yeah, I don't think they know who their God is.
Yeah. So these then, under this threefold union, our country shall repudiate every principle of its constitution as a Protestant and Republican government. And I'm pretty sure that's what we see today. And shall make provision for the propagation of papal falsehoods and delusions. Then we may know that the time has come for the marvelous working of Satan and that the end is near. So this is where we're headed. And what role would Islam have played in causing us to be in this situation, according to Jeff?
Stirring everything up, stirring up the soup.
Okay, so first thing, it becomes an enemy of the United States. It's going to use violent action, sudden and violent action against the US. Has that happened? 9/11 has to be the fulfillment of that event. And did that change the environment for what we have today?
Most definitely.
Yes.
It's pretty clear that 9/11 first introduced changes in the laws in order to have the situation we have today, and changes in people's attitudes. So there's a lot that's gone on since 9/11. So Adilio's right in the sense that we do have the result that we have today because of 9/11. Of course we do, because 9/11 happened, and what we have is obviously a product of that. But I still think that the idea that 9/11 is an inside job doesn't accord with what Jeff is presenting here. I think we would agree with that.
Yes.
Okay. It is at the time of the national apostasy, when acting on the policy of Satan, the rulers of the land will rank themselves on the side of the man of sin. It is then the measure of guilt is full. The national apostasy is the signal for national ruin. Now, what we're having right now, and this is my opinion, whether it's correct or not, is this is a precursor to the Sunday law. It's not the Sunday law. But what's happening with the pandemic, I believe that it will abate for a time. Because what we see in bringing about a tyranny in any history is you have to have a reprieve. People have to have in their mind, if we put up with this for a little while, it will go away. And so the next time it comes, they put up with it even longer. It weakens their resolve to stand against something. 9/11, the inconvenience of having to go through scanners and have longer lines at airports. I mean, people tried to protest it, but they eventually accepted it, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah. And the same thing happens with masks or whatever happened. And so people go along with it a bit at a time, but then they get a reprieve. At least we did here in Alberta. We had masks are removed, everybody's happy, and then they come back in again. Okay, well, this is just going to be temporary again. And so people go along with it. Well, now we're going to have vaccines attached to that. You have to get vaccines. Well, okay, I'll put up with that. So each time it comes, we put up with more and more of our liberties being removed, thinking, well, they're going to be given back to us again. So we just have to put up with this. There's some emergency that we can set aside our liberties. But eventually we'll have no liberties at all and no means to even protest them. Now, this is where we're leading to. We're not there yet, but we're almost there. Can we agree to that? Or would somebody say that we are there?
We're at the beginning of it.
Definitely
Maybe the beginning.
Yeah. And all it's going to do is continue to progress and progress rapidly. So the fourth angel's message now begins to cry aloud as God's people are sealed, the four winds of strife are let loose. So again, Jeff mentioned some of these things, but he's not very particular or very precise of what he's referring to. That is, the detail isn't there, right? He's got the basic sketch, but he has left out the details. Now, maybe if we watched a presentation, he might have some examples of what he means. But in this, we can see that it's not as clear as it could be. Now, he's going to go back, and I'm not sure why. Try to figure out why he goes back to the first four trumpets again. I think it's mostly that he's going to look at what happens with the Sunday law. That's the only thing I can see. So he just says here, Alaric, Genesaric, Attila the Hun, and Odieser brought the final demise of Western Rome. This history parallels the first three seals. So remember, we talked about that. He said this in another place. So he's actually repeating some of what he said earlier, which culminates in 1533 when Justinian gave his authority to the papacy. 5 years later, the papacy began to rule the world. The history includes 330, when the dragon gave his seat to the papacy, and 321, when the first Sunday law was passed. So again, we have this first Sunday law in 321, but that connects with what happens with the rise of the papacy, that we do have types of the Sunday law. We could even say 508, 538. These are connected to the first Sunday law. That is, things that are types of the Sunday law, the type of persecution that happens to Christians under the papacy. So the other thing then is this deadly wound being healed. So Jeff is going to quote Daniel 11, verse 41 and 42. And then again, I'm trying to understand fully what he's saying. The four winds of strife are let loose in verse 41 at the Sunday law in the USA and now they ravage the world, paralleling the time period when Egypt was willing to give its precious things to Israel in order to stay the plagues of Egypt. So I've never actually seen him interpret this way. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt. But he's making somehow a parallel when they spoiled the Egyptians, which seems kind of contrary to what's being said here. These winds of strife are being identified as the fruits or works of radical modern Islam. The world cries out for a leader that can stay the plagues. So where is Jeff placing radical modern Islam back in 2000 in connection with the Sunday law? Because we can agree that the winds are identified with the fruits or works of radical modern Islam, correct?
Yes.
So is he saying that the national ruin is brought about in part by Islam?
It would almost seem so.
Yeah. So some of these ideas are similar to ideas we had later on, but they're not well formed. They're not very clear. Now we can see if we look at, because he's paralleling the Egyptian plagues with this plague of locusts from the east. Would we agree that that's what he's trying to do here? Because the world cries out for a leader that can stay the plagues. Now, so to me, again, it's not very clear what he's trying to say. He's kind of introducing these ideas. It's like he's throwing a bunch of ideas out there about what the role of Islam, but he's not very precise. It's not very detailed. It's not very ordered. But he's going back to these different histories and all bringing them together. Paralleling the work of Justinian in 533, the papacy is once again identified as the corrector of heretics and the head of the churches, and the deadly wound is healed. This is accomplished when the beast that is the seventh head and 10 kings of Revelation 17, the United Nations, gives its kingdom to the eighth beast, the papacy, the eighth king, the beast, the papacy. The dragon once again gives its authority and seat to the papacy. Thus the four winds then bring down the last kingdom after the 10 kings give their kingdom away. The first Sunday law in 321 parallels the last and world Sunday law. In the midst of this escalating crisis, human probation closes and the papacy comes to an end. So it seems to me that Jeff is on the right track here, but he doesn't have 9/11, this attack by Islam, placed yet. And he doesn't see, because he's just looking at the Sunday law is coming again. And now he's throwing these past histories into the mix. And we can see that there's something to do with Islam, something to do with the taking down of the United States, and the papacy, and the close of probation. But it's not clear. So Jeff, after 9/11, is going to go back, and it's going to take time for him to sort through this and then finally apply what he says in this study to 9/11. So we can see why he didn't just immediately, when 9/11 occurred, said, I predicted 9/11, it's the third woe. It took them time. Because what would Jeff first have seen 9/11 to be when it happened? I know it's hard to kind of put ourselves back there, but because, so much has happened but since 9/11, we sort of go back and color the past. But I don't think very many people who even understood the first, second, and third woe immediately thought this is the third woe. And we do color our memories of the past with thoughts we have about them today. But if I put myself back there, I knew that this was obviously an important event, but I didn't know how to place it. It was unexpected. Would we agree that for us it was unexpected, that we weren't expecting a 9/11?
True.
Yes.
It caught us off guard, caught Seventh-day Adventists off guard. And it took time until, I can't remember when I first heard somebody refer to, testimonies 9/11 as somehow being connected with this. But it wasn't the next day or anything. It wasn't that Sabbath. It would have been some months later that people started to talk about that. And initially, within Adventism, people were trying to sort it out. Now, most of what I saw was Adventists sort of doing evangelical futurism. They were trying to, and this was happening even before, back in the early 90s with the war with Iraq and Iran and all these different things. People trying to take these prophecies and applying them. And so there was also a bunch of nonsense going around after 9/11, which would have made it more difficult to sort through. So to get where they got to 3 years later in 2004, it might be even really more like about 2.5 years from when 9/11 happened to they do the presentations in 2004, where they've sorted through and they say 9/11 is the third woe, that it's the start of the third woe. And they move August 11th, 1840 from that context. Now, I'm going to put this here on the screen. Now, this is an old chart, and we were looking at it before the study. One of the things that's interesting is it's actually been edited, because this is a chart from 2011. And I believe that I might have edited this chart or someone else did. So if you look at the top there and it says the second angel's message, and it has April 19th, 1844. This chart originally back in 2011, what would it have as Protestants closed the door against the first angel's message? What date would it have placed there?
In 1942.
Yeah, so June of 1942. So I think I might have edited this one because this is from my trumpets paper. And I think I went through into, because I know I did it with lots of different documents, I would edit them just in paintbrush. And so you can see the font is slightly different. It doesn't quite even line up. So I think that's probably what happened is I edited it, but I didn't take the Protestants closed the door against the first angel's message out of there, which of course we never have placed as April 19th. And definitely in 2011, we didn't have April 19th because we didn't get April 19th until 2013 at the earliest. And I don't think it wasn't even until 2014 that we in this movement had then officially said that the second angel arrives on April 19th. So this is, so even though at the bottom there in really tiny print, it says 2011, that's when this chart was made, but it was corrected to April 19th by me or someone else. Now, of course, we can see here the main thing I brought this chart up for is this parallel of Millerite history. So we can see some of these details we generally don't talk about much anymore, but we used to. So we can see the time of the ends, and we're familiar with that. and the increase of knowledge from 1989 to 1996, or from 1798 to 1833, when Miller gets his credentials. So we parallel those two dates. Miller and Jeff are then being paralleled in that way as well. Now, we have the angering of the nations, Revelation 11:18. And I know it's not easy to see, but down here it talks about the angering of the nations. Here, the distress of nations. And you can see here you have the first angel's messages begins, and it's empowered. So it's going to be empowered on August 11th, 1840. Now here, there's going to be a restraint here. It says the four winds are restrained until the people of God have received the seal of God in their forehead. And so we look at this as a restraint of Islam, September 11th. The fourth angel joins the third angel's message, and the third woe begins, right? So that's the idea. And the third angel's message then is empowered. That's what's being understood back in 2011. Now, we generally don't put the third angel's message being empowered now at 9/11. And why not? Why don't we put the third angel's messages being empowered at 9/11, as this chart shows?
It would be generally empowered the Sunday law.
Yeah, it would be empowered at the Sunday law. But the question is, why in 2011 are we putting the third angel's message being empowered at 9/11? But we don't say that today. What was the change about our understanding of 9/11 that happened between 2011 and let's say 2016?
Was it the sprinkling of the latter rain?
Well, they have the latter rain sprinkling on September 11th, 2001. That's been going on for a long time, that understanding of it. Now, what about, do we see midnight or the midnight cry in here?
We do not.
Yeah, so we do not. So the Sunday law is being lined up with the second angel's message arriving, correct? On this chart. Okay.
Yeah.
So in 2000, trying to think exactly when it was, I know it was in connection. Once we started to understand the first day of the fifth month, we started to have some changes that occurred in how we were looking at the second angel's messages arriving. So I can't remember the exact time. I just remember that I presented it at Colin's Bible study because Jeff had presented it. So I kind of think it was 2013. But it could have been later, that the second angel's message arrives on September 11th, 2001. So before that, we never had the second angel arriving at 9/11. We just had the third angel's message being empowered. And you can see here that we're paralleling the first, second, and third angel's messages, but in a very different way than we have before. Now, in a way, you can see that this is actually the big line, right? At the bottom. That's really going to be the big line. This is Ellen White's line. This is how she would look at it to some degree, except for the first part there. She would see that what happens is October 22nd, 1844, the three angels' messages begins, and then the mighty angel of Revelation 18 will come down. And when it does so, it will join the third angel, and it will swell into a loud cry. So it's going to then empower that third angel's message to swell to a loud cry. And then after the loud cry, we have the close of probation. So we should be able to see here that in 2011, Jeff has not done some of the things that we're quite familiar with. One is, in Millerite history, we still haven't had the seven thunders being unsealed completely. They have begun to be unsealed. But midnight and the midnight cry are extremely important symbols that need to be placed. Now, when we look at 9/11 and the purpose of 9/11 in the big line, can we agree that Jeff is correct in the bottom, the last generation, that big line is correct?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, on the big line, yeah.
Yeah. See, I would say yes, that it's correct. It's not something that needs to be corrected. But we know that as more light came to us, we came to understand that period of time between 9/11 and the Sunday law in more detail. And we came to understand that with the understanding of midnight and the midnight cry that precede the Sunday law. But on the big line, what does midnight and the midnight cry parallel? Okay, just the loud, what does the loud cry parallel from Millerite history? That's simple.
The midnight cry.
Midnight cry. So the Sunday law parallel what from Millerite history? Now here, if we looked at it this way, even if accepted as April 19th, would we say that the Sunday law parallels April 19th, or would we take some other point in Millerite history to parallel the Sunday law? If we're looking at the big line.
I would have to consider if that wasn't some other point on the line.
Yeah. So we could say that the Sunday law parallels midnight. And why would we say that? Why would I take this Sunday law and loud cry here and say, if we're going to compare this with Millerite history, would we say this is August 11th, 1840? 9/11, right? Is August 11th, 1840. That would be pretty clear. And then we could, and I'm not saying that we necessarily have to have midnight here. We either have to align this with April 19th or with July 21st. It definitely is part of this history. You could say that April 19th would line up with the image of the beast test, maybe. I don't know. And then that the Sunday law would line up with July 21st, and then midnight cry would line up with the loud cry. But Ellen White says that the midnight cry, where does she place it? Does she place it at the Exeter camp meeting? And notice here, for the midnight cry, they don't have August 15th. They just have August 12th to 17th. So that's one of the things that shows us it's not something where, because we didn't get April 19th until after we came to understand the first day of the fifth month, or in connection with that. So if I'm going to have April 19th on this chart, which I'm pretty sure is my edit, you can see the problem there, correct? That this is midnight cry. Ellen White lines it up with what? She doesn't line it up with the Exeter camp meeting. When does she say the midnight cry was given?
Isn't it Boston?
Yeah, so she says Boston because she says midway. And Joseph Bates also understands it that way. The way that we ended up getting the Exeter camp meeting is actually by Loughborough, who gets confused between what happened at the Exeter camp meeting and what happened in Boston. That is, he places Samuel Snow's words from his Boston presentation, he places them at Exeter. And that's not the presentation he gave. because he couldn't have possibly said how long that they were in the tearing time was 3 months in August. Because that would have been 4 months, right? So there is that problem there that Loughborough introduces. And that created confusion. So Adventists have always had this misunderstanding about Millerite history. Now, so I don't know. I think it's quite possible that we can just say that the midnight cry is not just the Exeter camp meeting. It's from Boston to Exeter. How about we place it that way? And if that was the case, then wouldn't we line the Sunday law up with the first day of the first month? In this case, if we're going to look at the big line, that's at least a possibility. So this line here, you would have to say that Jeff is not wrong. He might be wrong necessarily if you say, when did the second angel's message arrive? Did it arrive in June of 1842, which this chart would have said, or did it arrive on April 19th, 1844, when the Protestants don't close the door, but the door of the first angel's message is closed to the Protestants. But again, you might argue it's a period of time there. First, the Protestants close the door, and then finally the door is closed to them. So these things we're going to go into later. And this is the point here, is that Jeff, prior to 9/11, he's going to be lining up 1989 with August 11th, 1840. Even though he also had lined the events of 1989 with 1798. So how do we explain this sort of changes in our understanding? How do we relate to them?
The advancing light.
Okay, so it's advancing light. Now, is the advancing light contradicting past light? I mean, if we move a waymark, that's the way people would sort of characterize it. Jeff kept moving the waymarks. Or are we trying to discover the waymarks of the past?
It's more refining.
Okay. So, let's try to parallel this to somebody doing some surveying. Let's say there was a waymarks or landmarks. You know what those are? They're surveyor marks. They place them in the ground. When I used to live in the bush, I lived right next to a surveyor mark, one of those posts coming out of the ground that warned you to not disturb that. And it was like from my cabin, it was just like 5 feet away from the door. So I ended up placing this cabin here in the bush on Crown land, just right next to this waymark thing. So I always had an interest of those things ever since I found this waymark right next to my cabin. But anyway, but if you were going to go through and find a bunch of old waymarks of a place that's overgrown, could you be misled as to what those waymarks apply to?
Quite likely.
Yeah. So as we're going through the past, we weren't really, it hadn't unfolded to us clearly yet. We start to look at these waymarks from Millerite history, and we begin to place them on our line, and we place some of them incorrectly. It doesn't mean that God wasn't leading us. And now the question has to be, though, as we continue to look at this understanding of and examining the foundation here that we're doing, we have to be very, very careful that we're not moving the waymarks, that we're establishing the waymarks in Millerite history very precisely so that we can understand the time that we are in. Now, in some ways, I mean, this can seem just merely like an intellectual exercise. But how is it that we unseal those 7 seals? How is it that we come to understand the waymarks of Millerite history? What is happening to do that? Because this movement isn't just passively looking at Millerite history and doing some studying. What are we doing? What has this movement been doing?
Oh, we're looking at the
recognizing
waymark.
our,
Okay, Jeff first. I think it was Jeff.
Well, we're looking at the waymarks.
Okay, we're looking at them, but how do we come to recognize them?
Well, we see present truth unfolding.
Okay, and how do we do that?
Well, the waymarks.
Okay,
Going back and forth.
yeah, okay, Stephen?
yeah, we're recognizing that history is repeating.
Okay, so we're passing over the same ground that the Millerites passed over. We're going through their experience, correct?
Yes.
And that's the thing about this that I find so fascinating, this whole study that we've done in examining the foundation. Right from the beginning, when we started looking at how the Millerites understood Daniel 11, verse 36 to 45, right? When they looked at a view very similar to Uriah Smith's, which we know is wrong, is that they tried to address the king of the north and the king of the south as being Syria and Egypt, or Turkey and Egypt. And then they tried to see another power, France, as being this power, which really is the papacy. So that they got it all mixed up. And yet we could see God's providence and how our movement is paralleling what happened in Millerite history. Now, the big thing, of course, for us right now is July 18th. And we can see that July 18th served the same purpose as October 22nd, 1844. That is, we had in this movement, first November 9th, which serves the same purpose as April 19th. And then we see July 18th. So we have November 9th and July 18th paralleling the first day of the first month and the 10th day of the 7th month in Millerite history, April 19th and October 22nd. And so now we recognize that we're after October 22nd within this movement. So this is a separate line. It's not the big line, right? It's not the close of probation for the world hasn't happened, which it does parallel. And you can see here, where is Jeff putting October 22nd in this line? Does he place it at the Sunday law? No, which he does later, right? Here he has October 22nd lined up with the close of probation, human probation. So that is how he used to do it. Later on, once we discovered midnight in the midnight cry, and even before we discovered midnight itself, Jeff then took October 22nd to line up with the Sunday law. Now, he does have here Sunday law, probation closes for SDA, with Protestants closing their door. But even as we continue to zoom in, so these are going to be events, like I came into this movement in 2010. And I remember I went to a camp meeting in Oklahoma, but in 2014, we went to the camp meeting in the fall of 2014 in Arkansas. And they had started the School of the Prophets there. And you had Tyler, Michael, and Brittany, who were the students. And at that time in 2014, they had already had the symbol for the midnight cry, the first day of the 5th month, introduced to this movement and established. And this is where we start to begin what a lot of the critics of the movement, the people who left, were saying is that Jeff was now moving the waymarks because they didn't want to put midnight in the midnight cry before the Sunday law. At the time, I didn't fully understand what the objection was, but Jeff was not wrong. Jeff was now recognizing that there was this parallel, and we're going to look into this further in detail as time goes on. But you can see he doesn't have midnight in the midnight cry before the Sunday law. He doesn't have October 22nd lined up. That's because this is the big line. Now, what ended up happening as we started to look at this smaller line is that there was this confusion. So I remember in 2016 talking with people who had been in the movement, and they were grappling with what Jeff was doing with the lines. And I told them I didn't understand the lines. And that's because I didn't. And I didn't for a reason, is I didn't understand the difference between the big line and the smaller lines. Now, it was Michael who introduced this idea of fractals. And these fractals kept changing on how we were using them. The initial idea was that you have within each message, you have 3 divisions. You have a first, a second, and a third. You have a 3-step testing prophetic message, which within each of the messages. But as time went on, we started to do things to line up these lines in sort of parallel, with 9/11 serving a different purpose in each of the lines. And I don't think that that was correct. And this was definitely developed much more by Parminder, so that you had a line of the priests, the line of the Levites, the line of the Nethinims, and the line of the 144,000. And these things created a great deal of confusion. So those are things we're going to look at. But you can see here right now, the purpose of 9/11, if you're before 9/11, you're not going to see things exactly the way that we understand them now. But before 9/11, Jeff is looking for Islam to come. So he is predicting 9/11, not necessarily the exact event, but Islam being involved in attacking the United States. And then that's going to lead to the Sunday law. But back in 2000, he's also mixing up 1989 with August 11th, 1840. He doesn't have an event, because it hasn't happened yet, that he's going to line up with August 11th, 1840. But once he has that, you can see he has this line that's very nicely structured. There's really nothing wrong with this line. And this is the line we still believe in as Seventh-day Adventists. This is the line we've always believed in, except this repeat of history at the beginning. So we would just look at October 22nd, and then the next thing is the Sunday law. But now we know that you can't have a third without a first and the second. So we can't say that the third angel's message is empowered at September 11th as they do. That would be just, it's kind of right in the sense that the angel of Revelation 18 joins the third angel's message. Now, before, Adventists would have placed that at the Sunday law itself. But can we see that September 11th is connected to the Sunday law? Even though it's been a while, time isn't really an element here. It's the progression of events. That what happened at 9/11, what Jeff is predicting, is something that's going to create an environment in, religiously, politically, all these different, ways, that's going to make room for the Sunday law. And we can see quite clearly that Jeff was correct. He just didn't know that it was going to be the World Trade Center being attacked. But he knew it was an attack on the United States. And he wasn't looking at some past event like 1993. He wasn't saying 1993 was a fulfillment of that.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
As the movement has studied the third woe, and it shows third woe begins at September 11.
Mhm.
Is that third woe a point in time for a year or two, or is it still occurring?
Okay, so that's a good question. Now, you can see what's happening here is there's a restraint of Islam that begins. And when we looked at the woes, one of the things here, I'm going to switch to this other. Here I'm going to have to go. How am I going to do that? I guess I could go. I'm going to have to change this. Just hang on. Okay. And let me see if I can find this here. Okay. Okay, I'll use this chart. So on this chart here, you can see we have first woe, second woe, third woe. Now in this one, I put 1993 as Islam loosed, and I put 9/11 as Islam restrained, and that's not correct. At least I don't think it's correct. That's what I put back in the past. And I left it here on this chart for this. These are more charts that I was looking at and thinking about. Now, the problem here is that we see that when the first woe begins, it begins with a restraint, right? But is Islam loosed in 632?
I don't recall that.
Okay, well, this is Abu Bakr's command, right? And this is when they're going to be have that first period of 150 years. Now, we could say Islam is loosed in 606, maybe, you know, or some other event. That's the beginning of the fifth trumpet. We could maybe say that at the fifth trumpet, they're loosed. Whatever we're saying is that Islam is loosened before it's restrained. And it's going to be restrained in 1299. Now, is it also restrained, though, in 632?
Explain how that would work, please.
Okay, so when Abu Bakr gives his command, does he have a restraint on what they are to do? What are they restrained from doing?
Okay, I see your point. They're restrained from those that have accepted the monastic life and have the seal of God.
Yeah, and also not to hurt any grass or trees or whatever, right? So there is a type of restraint that occurs there at the time that they're sort of loosed, right? But in the first woe, it is a restraint because there they can hurt but not kill. But then they're going to be loosed at the beginning of the second woe. Because at the second woe, they're going to be able to kill. And that causes the fall of Constantinople 4 years later.
Okay,
So-
but there's also a numerical point that's kind of interesting.
Okay.
632 taking away 606 gives you 26. 2 times 13.
Okay. Yeah, so there's 2 times 13 between those two periods. Yeah. 13 becomes a number or a symbol of Islam. And I'm going to go, I'm not sure where I'm going to do the study or which part I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be doing a study on 12 and 13 because we've already touched on it a little bit. It probably will end up being Friday night studies, though those ones are on the sanctuary, but I'm not sure when. It might be a little while till I get into those. But this symbol of 13 and the symbol of 12 and the role that they play prophetically is pretty profound. So we'll deal with that at another time. But I take your point. Now, but the question is about loosening and restraining, because we say that Islam was restrained at 9/11. And so I have that there. Now, I wouldn't now put the third woe as beginning at 1993. I did this temporarily as I actually sent this slide to a guy who was trying to look at 1993 as the third woe. And so it was part of a discussion chart, but Islam did do an attack on the United States, the first attack by Islam on American soil. And it was an attack on the World Trade Center, which I think is pretty profound. I don't think you can just dismiss that as insignificant. But that the World Trade Center was then attacked again, and that marks the beginning of the third woe. I think we would have to agree that it's that marks the beginning. So you don't need, in order to have a woe, you can see that the woe in the first woe, Islam is there, and there's even another period of 5 months. Islam is doing things, but the woe is a very specific period of time that is being prophetically marked as a time period. And same with the second woe. And that there's a significance of these time periods. They're very precise and they're purposeful because the third woe is going to be connected to them. And to try to understand the connection between 9/11 and the first woe and the second woe, I don't think we fully understood the chronological significance of these connections. That is, 9/11 doesn't just pop out of nowhere, but 9/11 is marking a point that is also connected to 11/9. That there is something about our history. And we tried to make that connection as saying that November 9th would be about Islam and July 18th would be about Islam, but they weren't. And so were we wrong?
I don't think so.
Yeah. There's something we're missing. You know, my concern right now for this movement is that this movement isn't examining these questions. We already know what the pandemic is. We already know it's a type of the Sunday law. My concern is that this movement really needs to understand our lines, and we've been neglecting them for the most part.
I agree.
And all of this stuff that Jeff did, if we're not going to go back and examine it and sort it out, we're not going to be placed on a solid foundation. We're going to get caught up in the events of the day, and we won't know where we stand. So I don't have all the answers to this, right? I mean, that's why we're doing these studies. We are trying together to go back and look at the foundation and understand it. But the very fact that Jeff, in the year 2000, could, in a sense, predict 9/11 and yet not recognize it until a few years after it occurs for its significance, I think speaks to us about our condition and why we have to understand what has been happening in the world, how it's connected to these lines. Now, one of the things about the pandemic, remember, Jeff made the prediction that the pandemic would happen between Raphia and Panium. And he made that prediction in January of 2017. Now, we didn't have a date for Raphia and Panium back then. We just had these new events that we were looking at. But eventually we did attach them to November 9th and July 18th. Were we correct in doing that?
How could we not be correct?
Yeah, we had to have been correct, right? Now, there's a lot of things that we have to sort through. that, I don't think is going to be very simple. You can see here, I've got trying to find something here. I have a lot of charts. Okay, well, this probably just good enough. I mean, I could have drawn this on the board. So here we just have this chart, the 777 days, November 9th to July 18th. But we have December 25th coming up soon. How much are we talking about this structure in this movement right now, outside of our studies here? Is there an emphasis in this movement right now on December 25th, 2021 coming up?
No,
No.
no,
There be?
got it.
I mean, shouldn't we be concerned about this line? Because if we believe July 18th was in God's providence and November 9th was, shouldn't we have significance in December 25th?
I would think so.
And when the group that was pretending to be the leadership of this movement, acting like the people, they made their declaration on December 6th, and they didn't want us to have anything to do with December 25th. Aren't we just the same as them if we ignore December 25th?
I would say so.
So we can't ignore it. Now, we're not predicting an event, but we need to recognize that something about December 25th for this movement is to be the focus, because we looked at November 9th, we took it seriously. We took July 18th seriously. But are we taking December 25th seriously? It's not a 3-day call to come gather at Jerusalem to repent of our marriage to the strange wives. It's not Ezra chapter 10. There's a lot to these structures that very few people have taken the time to look at. I'm just trying to see if I got the one with January 14th. So remember, if we look at November 9th, 1989, for instance, is that an important date in this movement? I don't know how well people can see this. But this is the thing that marks the time of the end. It's 1,533 weeks to March 27th, 2019. And March 27th, 2019 was connected to this structure of these different March 27th that ended in March 27th, 2021. January 14th, 2017, Jeff presents the message regarding Raphi and Peniam, which he connects to the pandemic. 1,533 days go to March 27th, 2021. And we know that March 27th, 2021, it's 273 days to December 25th, 2021. We have all of these structures telling us something about this movement, and we're ignoring them. Now, I'm not saying the pandemic is not an important part of our study, but it can't be all that we study. Because how do we understand the present?
By looking at the past.
We have to look at the past. And whose past is the primary past we have to look at?
All right.
What's that?
Millerite movement.
Yeah, the Millerite movement, right? And also our own history that parallels the Millerite movement. We need to understand our history, and we understand it by looking at the past. So, for me, When I look at what we're studying right now, all it tells me is that we need to understand the present by understanding the past. You know, this one here to me too is January 14th. It's going to be 1,533 days to March 27th. But we had also this structure here, 273 days and 1260, because 1533 is a combination of 1260 and 273. And that pointed to June 27th, which was three weeks prior to July 18th. And we took those 3 weeks, at least I did, seriously, that this was a parallel to Daniel fasting in Daniel chapter 10. But we now have from then to, June 27th, March 27th, and now 273 days to December 25th. That date's coming up. And we need to understand what it means. Now, we could wait till after December 25th and then try to decide what it means. But I don't think that we can afford to wait. And why is that? Why can't we just wait till December 25th and see if anything happens?
We have to be personally prepared for what's going to happen. We can't just push this off thinking, oh, God in his mercy is going to take care of us on that day. We have to come into this covenantal relationship with him before then, so that we are prepared to be able to give whatever message it is that he wants us to give after that time.
Right. And we know that this isn't about an internal event, because all of these lines, all of these waymarks have been internal. And internal in our own hearts, just in the movement itself. Now, if we wait to December 25th, that date will pass us and we will never be able to understand its significance. Would you agree with me on that?
I don't disagree at all.
Yeah. And this is the issue that we need to be pressing in this movement. Now, I do apologize for the stuff that happened on Sabbath, because for me personally, I was trying to make a point, and I'm not going to excuse anything that I did, because I don't think there is an excuse. I was caught off guard. I wasn't prepared. Even though I prayed and I knew something might happen, I wasn't prepared for what happened. And that's my fault, no one else's. But the point that was trying to be made was that we are getting sidetracked. That's my main concern. We're getting sidetracked by things that are a mixture of truth and error, that are rumors, that are suppositions. We know what this pandemic is. It's a type of the Sunday law. Colin's presentation was good on that. But people are caught up emotionally in something else when they need to be caught up in these lines. We need to be talking about the date that's coming. Now, I understand why people don't want to talk about it, because we've talked about 2 dates already, November 9th and July 18th, and nothing happened. But if we say we believe in July 18th, aren't we saying we believe in December 25th?
We should be.
We should be. And if we don't believe in December 25th, any profession of believing in July 18th is just a false profession.
Question.
Yeah.
So where in any of your papers, or where could I find more information on this date and how it was arrived at and what meanings could be derived from it?
Well, my 777 chiasm paper, the one that I wrote before July 18th, where I show that July 18th could be a failed prediction and explain why. That has at least the seeds to understand the significance of December 25th. Now, there's been some false ways in which we presented December 25th, that we said it was going to be the Sunday law, and that's not quite correct. we believe that the Sunday law could not happen before December 25th, which is quite different. That was the earliest we could have a Sunday law. But the main thing about December 25th is it's the end of our line. It's the end of a structural chiasm that begins in 2012. And even that's part of a larger structure. These are all parts of these structures. So you can find the 777 chiasm paper on my academia site. So just search up Theodore Turner 777 academia, and you'll find my paper.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So anyway, we're going to close with prayer, and some of what we're going to be doing for the rest of this week is going to be a bit of a review of different things. We're not going to. I don't want to move ahead in the rest of this week. I want to sort of go back and again look at Millerite history. One of the things I want to do is read Josiah Litch's understanding of the trumpets. So we're going to go back and review the trumpets again, but not from Uriah Smith's perspective, but from Josiah Litch's perspective. So it should be interesting. Okay. Well, thanks for the questions and for the discussion. Let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful of all the things that you have done in our lives, for the way that you have led this movement, the way that you have led Jeff in recognizing through a study of Bible prophecy, an event that has changed the world. And we know, Lord, that this still affects us today. Help us to understand these things. And to, as we pass through the experience of the Millerites, Lord, that we can be faithful, that we can pass the tests of character. You know, Lord, as we can see, we don't have the character that we should have. And we ask for forgiveness for any harsh words that we may say to one another. Be with us throughout this week. May your angels watch over us. Be with Dwight in his travels, and help us, Lord, to fulfill the purpose that you have created for us, to reflect the image of Christ perfectly. Thank you for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.